important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana.
Well, my name is Karl McCardle. I was born in Dixon, Illinois, graduated from high school there in 1959, and just sort of floated around. I got to thinking I was a jinx. The first job I had was with a commercial bakery that went bankrupt. Then I moved to a furniture store that went bankrupt. Then I went to work for a clothing store. The owner died, and I figured I'd better find something that's a little safer for me. So I decided to enlist in the Army.
When recruits arrive at the Basic Combat Training Center, most of them are not up to the physical requirements of soldiering. Requirements that must include the ability to go all out for long periods of time in case of crisis or emergency. And the ordinary work of the military routine, vigorous though it may be, still cannot bring the men up to the necessary level of conditioning. That's why they need the benefits of the physical fitness program.
Why the Army? Why the Army recruiter?
Well, the Air Force, with my glasses, I could never be a flight crew. And if I couldn't be on the airplane, well, I joined the Air Force. And I didn't like blue water. That ruled out the Navy. So nice dry land, that seemed to fit me very well. And I'm glad I did choose it. I went through basic training in Fort Leonard Wood. Went over to speak to an officer prior to my graduation from basic, and he was going to pick out my school for me. And he's looking down through a list of things, and he says, "Oh, here, cryptographic repair. That's code work." He says, "That'll work well." So I agreed. I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
At Fort Monmouth, Karl will have to go through 28 weeks of training on electronics and cryptographic equipment. He graduated from the class and had to teach 2 weeks of a class about stable ferromagnetic switching logic. Later, he would volunteer for a unit in Vietnam, a unit in the Army Security Agency.
President Kennedy, with presidential order, April 1961, authorized a ASA unit to be deployed to Vietnam. It was the first operational unit in Vietnam. The first guys arrived there in August. I arrived the following year, 1962.
Elements of the 25th Infantry Division prepare to launch Operation Longfellow on the 17th of April. From this jumping-off point at Dak To in Kon Tum Province, 480 kilometers north-northeast of Saigon, the troops head for LZ, Ohio, 32 kilometers to the north. One of the primary missions of this operation is to relocate Montagnard tribesmen from this area to the resettlement camp at Dak To.
You all know that during World War II, there was the Organization of Strategic Services that did all sorts of sneaky Pete work. Well, after World War II, it was divided into the CIA, which took care of all foreign intelligence, and the NSA, which took care of all civilian, shall we say, intelligence work. And the NSA had their military branches, the ASA, Army Security Agency, Naval Security Group, which was shipborne, and Air Force Signal Security Organization, the AFSSO. But they were much smaller.
For the background to our involvement in Vietnam, We must go back to a shell-cratered place called Dien Bien Phu. Supplied only by air, completely surrounded by the opposing Vietnamese, French troops are fighting the last battle of a long war over what had been called French Indochina.
You couldn't wear dog tags, couldn't have ID, couldn't wear anything GI once we went up country on our little sojourns. And we couldn't carry any American weapons. And I got to pick, and I picked a German MP-40 submachine gun. It was ideal for the job.
Since 1954, every American president has offered support to the people of South Vietnam. We have helped to build, and we have helped to defend. Thus, over many years, we have made a national pledge to help South Vietnam defend its independence. And I intend to keep that promise.
The only thing that they could have done was send in U.S. troops, and that's what finally they had to do. And this is strictly my opinion, shared by a few others, that if President Kennedy had lived and been reelected, by January after his reelection, we would have been out of Vietnam, without a doubt. Because he was beginning to see just what it really was.
They came here, the exile and the stranger, brave but frightened, to find a place where a man could be his own man. They made a covenant with this land, conceived in justice, written in liberty, bound in union.
The first American killed in combat in Vietnam was a member of our unit. His name was Specialist 4th Class James T. Davis. He was training a group of Vietnamese to do the intercept work. When their truck was ambushed, he was killed. Only the driver survived, and that was because Davis got him out of the truck and got him down into an irrigation ditch and covered him. And then he tried to return fire and was killed, but the driver is the only one that survived to tell the story.
You know more than what the average American, or in some cases the average soldier, knew.
Yeah.
How do you think the media portrayal was handled of what was happening in Vietnam? Do you think
Terrible.
Could you elaborate?
It made us sick. They never documented any of the atrocities that were committed by the North Vietnamese. But that one picture of the Vietnamese being shot on his knees in Saigon, what they didn't say was the man that he shot had just executed that officer's whole family. The man, but they never mentioned that.
Unfortunately, the media's reaction to the execution of Nguyen Van Lim was not the worst of the war. American soldiers faced great aggression from the citizens and media of their home country while fighting a very bloody war against the North Viet Cong. Karl may not have been on the front lines, but he knew the brutality of what happened. The Army Security Agency did, however, have troops on the front line, and unfortunately, some would not make it home from Vietnam. Some parts of the nation were more violent to returning American soldiers than other parts. Unfortunately, many soldiers faced this undeserved harassment. Some were egged, while others were assaulted. After battles in Vietnam, they faced a new battle in their home country, a battle that would be against them personally. Many tucked away their uniforms and ceased to mention their service, hiding their identity of being a soldier. Those soldiers would not receive the recognition they deserved until after the war. Not only would they face harassment, but some would have to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, a disorder that would affect them for the rest of their life and be a constant reminder of the war they faced.
I finished my tour in Vietnam, and then I was approached by the signal officer of the 3rd RRU, and he says, "Have you picked your duty assignment yet?" And that was the thing. We got to choose wherever we wanted to go when we were done with Vietnam. And I said, "I suppose back stateside somewhere." And he says, "I have a request if you're interested. They'd like you in Shitoshi, Japan." I says, "Why me?" He says, "I don't know." But he says, "If you're interested," he says, "I'll find out what I can." So Shitoshi, Japan is on the northernmost island of Hokkaido. It is the only American unit on the island. It's part of an air base. And most ASA units are near an air base because we are supposed to be non-combat. If the balloon goes up, they get you out first and you melt your equipment behind you. And so anyway, here I was. And I left Vietnam, it was about 105 degrees. I'm wearing tropical worsted uniform. Stepped out of the airplane, temperature was 52 degrees. I thought I was gonna freeze to death. But I hopped in a Jeep, they took me over to the barracks, and as we're driving down the road, there's these things that look like hangman's gibbets, all along the road, about 15 feet high. I said to the driver, "What are those for?" He says, "So we can find the road when the snows come." Oh, but anyway, I loved it there. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven.
What would you say was the toughest or worst memory from your time overseas?
Worst memory? My worst memory is loading a casket on an airplane. I was I was honor guard, loading a casket on a plane coming home. Yeah. And I just, I've been asked, I belong to VFW, and they wanted me for honor guard, and I, nope, I won't do it.
Did you know that particular person, or?
I knew him, but we weren't friends, but I knew him, and he wasn't your ideal soldier. He was sort of frumpy-dumpy, He could have changed his fatigues a little more often when he was around. But he wasn't a bad guy, but he was killed in Saigon. He was, they almost took his head off with a knife. Sergeant Jack M. Lyle. His name is on the wall because it was in the middle of Saigon. It was seen, and they know. So Jack M. Lyle, yeah, I knew him. Drank a little too much, but he was not a bad guy. But yeah, we got him home. Yep. After the whole damn thing was over and we kind of washed our hands of it, after we had removed all our troops, all our armaments, all our equipment was still there. The Vietnamese had a 1 million-man army, And we had all this equipment, the best that we could give them, but we refused any ammunition or fuel supplies to them. They couldn't use it. They were just, it was pathetic.
When the United States withdrew from Vietnam, the war was still violent and ongoing. The war would not end until July 2nd, 1976, with North Vietnam being the victor. Many people that were in South Vietnam were sent to re-education camps, where they faced horrible conditions. In the United States, the war ended with 58,220 soldiers dead, and many more wounded. Citizens who dodged the draft were pardoned by Jimmy Carter. Even the children of soldiers were affected physically. 13% of the United States soldiers who dealt with Agent Orange had children with birth defects. Overall, the Vietnam War affected the United States negatively, and the story does not end there.
It was used all over. The main reason that the United States has never admitted that we set foot in Cambodia or Laos is that if we do, we assume responsibility for damages by Agent Orange. That is what I've heard, that yes, it was used, but they can't admit that we set foot there, that anything that got there was just drift from Vietnam. It was never dispersed there. So it's kind of ironic that the beginning and the end of our involvement in Vietnam was with the 3rd Radio Research Unit, ASA, beginning and end. One day they said I'd just gone over the borderline for diabetes, and my nurse practitioner, she says, "It's a shame you were never in Southeast Asia." I says, "But I was." She says, "No, it doesn't say so." I said, "Well, are you going to be here tomorrow?" And she said, "Yes." So back to the bank I went, back to my safe deposit box, got my passport out, went back the next day. She looked at it, and I said the same thing to her. I said, "Read it and weep." She said, "Can I take a picture of this?" And I said, "Sure." And so that qualifies me for Agent Orange benefits, and the sky's the limit. But that was the only thing I have to prove that I was there. Any other paperwork you want to find, I never left Oakland.
What do you think the younger generation should know about the role the ASA plays, or in other organizations like that now in war?
It would be nice if somebody would remember us, the guys who weren't there, the Sneaky Pete's. We have two websites. One of us is Old Spooks and Spies, and the other one is ASA Lives.
Hi, my name is Evan. I'm the creator of Vigilant Always. I apologize for the quality of this recording. I had to use my phone due to the pandemic. One of my original reasons for choosing this class was to learn something new, such as creating a documentary. However, by the end of this year, I learned that this class is way more than about learning, but about unveiling history and stories to others. When I first chose Karl, the only information I was given about him was that he was a part of a recon unit that was also the first unit deployed to Vietnam. What I didn't know was that his unit was the ASA, a unit that not many people, including me, knew of. This unit is so unknown that it is the perfect example as to why we create these documentaries. If these stories aren't told to others, they'll be completely forgotten someday. But fortunately, this story won't be. My class and I worked on our documentaries almost every day of this year. While we worked on our documentaries, we also supported veterans in the process by hosting events that allowed us to help them. And Karl, thank you for sharing your story with this class. I had a great time listening to your interview and creating a documentary about it. I hope you enjoyed the film.